Oh, it's so exciting for us to be here today, isn't it, Dave?
It is, yeah.
And Bruce, having spent many years at Yahoo, I would love to follow up after you with a conversation. I totally agree with everything that you said. And in terms of the intermediary, well, maybe Dave can build us one. We're going to share with you our journey of Featurespace. So it's a slightly different talk, but it's an awful lot about the company that we've built and the problems that we've solved in society. And of course, we've been given this question that we've posed ourselves to answer, which is, would you trust machine learning to keep your hard-earned money safe? Well, when it comes to trusting things, there aren't that many media companies that we trust any longer, but we quite like the oracle that is still the BBC. And when they say that Featurespace is a company that is silently sitting there at the heart of the banking and insurance industries, checking everything to make sure everybody's safe, we like to believe them because we think it's true. How do we keep banks safe in the old days? Well, it was the one that had the securest vault. You know, they were the banks that really were the ones that we would all put our money into. But what did the criminals in the old days look like who would actually hack into a traditional vault? There we go, another famous double act. So Butch and Sundance, they're quite nice looking. You wouldn't necessarily know that they were actual kind of criminals walking along the street, would you? But what about the real guys? Oh, here they are. You wouldn't necessarily know what they look like either. They don't look like criminals. And what about in a modern society? What does modern banking look like? Well, we don't any longer go into the vault in order to be able to place our hard-earned cash. It's all taking place through banking apps. So what do the modern criminals look like? Can we spot them when we walk along the road? This might not have been these criminals' best days, obviously, because these are mugshots. But nevertheless, there's no reason why we would pass somebody on the street who looked like this and suspect that they would be a criminal. Although there are still some of the old guys out there who still do like to try and hack into the traditional vault. And there are 2 movies made about these guys who broke into the Hatton Garden vaults. So traditional hacking still is taking place. But the problem with digital crime is actually it is an enormous problem for society. And in terms of value of problem, 2.4 trillion each year. And so that's a problem that we've decided that we really wanted to try and attack and to be able to help society solve. And one of the areas that we first went into, and this was proprietary research that we conducted into card fraud alone, which is one of the biggest contributors to that number. And that is, in card fraud, you've got the actual loss of the fraud itself, which is 22 billion. This is on an annual basis. But you've actually got the interchange fee loss as well, that calculated to 6 billion. And existing systems would identify incorrectly transactions and then block them. And so all of the cost that's associated with phoning up your bank and then saying, my card has been blocked, I need a new one, and can you please allow this transaction to go through, the cost of that is an additional 12 billion. So adding up to a 40 billion problem, the question for us was, how could we actually go about helping society and companies reduce that loss?
And I guess what we know is that all of the banks, ultimately, to win your trust and to have you as a customer, is they want to be able to protect your money. So that's what the financial institutions are trying to do, is they're trying to protect who you are. And they do that through identifying sort of known criminal activity and building models and processes to be able to identify that activity. But what we often see is, as that activity becomes blocked, is then the fraudsters react. They change how they operate. And so the net in which they're being caught becomes wider and wider. And the problem with increasing the size of that net is us as genuine customers then fall afoul of these systems and rules, and our transactions also get declined. Everyone in this audience has probably experienced putting their credit card number into an online form or swiping it at a restaurant or a shop and having that decline message come back. And that's typically a lot of these fraud systems which are introducing friction into the process of using your credit card. So we were given that challenge, and we went back while I was studying at the University of Cambridge under my Professor Bill Fitzgerald. He was a theoretical physicist, and back in the 1960s and 1970s was essentially building statistical models to describe data processes. And one of the great things that you could start to do with those models as they were built is then start to identify anomalies. So when were things taking place that you weren't expecting? And a good way to visualize that is through this data set. Here we can start to see a stream of data coming through, and the model is learning the statistics and then identifying the points in time when anomalies or changes in that signal are taking place. And so this enables us to have a very rich understanding in that data as it starts to go through. Now, when I was doing my PhD, the thing that I was interested in was applying this to human behaviour. So how could we start to take these types of analytics and look at people who were moving and walking? So this is something naturally we can do ourselves. If we're down at a coffee shop, we very quickly know who's a tourist. We know who's lost. We know who's late for a business meeting, just in terms of how they're interacting in their environment. And through these 15 data points, we have a very rich set of data. So I was able to get access to about 300 people interacting on a treadmill, and the task was to identify different types of behaviour through that data set. And essentially the 4 dimensions corresponding to the sliders there became through. So here we can see very stereotypical sort of male behaviour through the movement of these data points, and the other way, very typical female behaviour. So just something our brains naturally start to go and recommend. So how can we take this analysis and apply it to fraud prevention? So rather than building a model of the known bad behaviour, why don't we build a model of the good behaviour or the customers that we actually want to do business with? Now again, they can be very varied and change a lot. So let's build individual models of each of our customers. So what we then enables us to do is understand what normal looks like for you as an individual. And from this, we can then identify the bad activity. And that's for the parents in the room, they'll very easily know if you go to a playground, it's very easy to identify the bad child in terms of how they're interacting in the playground with all the other kids. So what we can then start to do is use these anomalies and bad activities to identify the fraud, but also identify new fraud that we haven't seen before. So responding very quickly to the fraudsters as they start to change their behaviour, and then make sure that we're not impacting those genuine customers. And the key thing to be able to do this is when we're using machine learning. It's not just using machine learned systems, which is traditionally how we see machine learning applied, where historic data is taken out of a system, that data is optimized to train a model, and that static model is deployed into production. Instead, what we've operationalized at Featurespace is the ability to continuously relearn the statistics in the data so that we maintain our accuracy and we keep an up-to-date view of what good customer behavior and what bad fraudsters are doing, so we can make sure that they're being blocked.
Thank you, Dave. So then the question for us is, learning and having this academic approach, is how do we get hold of a data set and what impact can we possibly have on these companies and organizations in comparison to the existing systems? So this was a credit card data set from a very large credit card operator here in the UK. And what we were doing was looking at a sample of their data and comparing our solution with their existing models, with the best fraud prevention tools in the market, as well as the analysts they already had. So it was a holistic system, and what we were trying to see is whether our models on their own could outperform. And this is the result we got. So remember, we were talking about that problem, which is the genuine decline. So we could reduce the number of false positives by 70%. But at the same time, we were able to identify in real time the exact moment when a customer was behaving out of anomalistically, and then be able to check to see whether that was a new real-time fraud attack. So that combined enabled us to be able to then take the impact of that technology on that data set and back calculate it out across the industry. So if you remember that 40 billion number we saw at the beginning, what we now realize is that technology can save those organizations and therefore consumers a 16 billion of that 40 billion. And we thought that was a big prize, certainly worth going after. And innovation at Featurespace comes in many different ways. So we have the heritage of the academic innovation, But also, when you're trying to produce product, you have to try and have product innovation as well, because there are an awful lot of models out there in data science who've been able to create good models, but that needs to be converted into a product. And it's not until you can productize something that you then really get the opportunity to scale. And this is where you're the first audience that we're sharing this with. We spend a huge amount of time trying to find a way to visualize software, which is quite a tricky and complex problem in itself. And so this is what we have developed. It's our ARIC Risk Hub. Software, as you know, is billions of lines of code that sits in terms of our product, and this is the visualization of the product that we've built. And it's working. So here you have the Risk Hub, and inside it, all of the various, the functionality and the features of the technology. And then in the center of that is the actual hub itself, the ARIC platform. So one of the things this is going to really help us with is that problem also that exists with software, which is an awful lot of software is about consultancy, because people at the front end will say, this is what I think I want, but by the time you get to deliver it, there's a real chasm that's occurred between the different departments inside a customer organization. This enables us to be able to say, right from the beginning, this is what is being purchased, and so therefore, now this is what we're able to deliver. It'll take a lot of the complexity out of that. And the other thing for the market is that it's really important. There are a lot of companies out there that have taken the innovations that we have here in marketing, as well as the technology, and say they can do it. But the truth of the matter is, it's really difficult to do what we do. It's really easy for another company to say that they can do it. However, that public recognition, therefore, of what we've built at Featurespace becomes really vitally important. And I'm delighted to say we've won lots of awards. But some of the awards that are the best ones was, for instance, one we got yesterday, which is a customer award. We didn't even know it was taking place. It's called Bob's Guide. They go to all the customers and they ask them what's the best in the market. And Featurespace was ranked #1 for fraud prevention. And of course, then it is that final word, which is the most important one too, which comes from the customers themselves. And our customers are really proud to be able to say they've selected Featurespace to do this very job. And here are some of them. Some of the largest financial services industry companies, some of the largest banks in the world. So quite a few of you, I'm about to have arrived here. I know Dave flew in this morning. Many of you will be getting on planes and flying back to wherever it is you've come from. We'd like to just let you know that if you've booked through a travel agent, all of those tickets that you've purchased will be protected by Featurespace because we're running the real-time fraud prevention on behalf of all the travel agents and the payment reconciliation that takes place between the airlines and the travel agents. So, would you trust machine learning to keep your hard-earned money safe? What do you reckon, Dave?
Well, I do, and I would, yeah.
Here's the ARIC Risk Hub. Thank you very much.